Recording. I'm gonna go through some stuff. Let me share this screen with you as well. Boom. Okay. Good. All right. We should be able to see. Let's see. Hold on. What's happening here? Uh-oh, I lost you guys. Hello.
I can still see you in the
Okay.
little box and the week 5 planning, legal, and ethical issues.
Cool. All right. I lost something here, so let me stop that share. Okay. And I think I shared the wrong thing. Well, I mean that should be what we're looking at, but let me go back to the share screen. Okay. All right. Let's see. I'm guessing you guys can't see my screen right now, or you can.
I can't, I just see
We
you.
can't.
Okay. Just me, huh? Okay, let's try this. There we go. That's the stuff right there. Okay, good.
Good.
Good, good. Okay. All right, so what we're talking about today is legal and ethical issues in the music classroom. We spoke a little bit about this last week, um, but let's go ahead and jump on in here. Uh, so Hansen talks about things like changes in demographics, school size, the population, diversity, right? What about parents and people being supportive of your programs, and how can we increase funding, stabilize for the future? All right, so that's strat planning. Let's go back to that again. Okay, so when we're talking about a strategic plan, we want to be thinking about a couple things. We want to think about the short term, 1 to 3 years. We want to be thinking about the long term, 3 to 5, 3 to 10, where you see this program going, how long you plan on being doing what you're doing, and how you see growth happening. And there's a lot of factors that we can look at that with. For example, you can look at your community. Are they building any schools? When you read the board briefs of school notes, are there any schools coming up open, in the next, year to 3 years, or in the next 3 to 10 years? Are there any schools? If there are, where are they located, and how is that going to be affecting your school? Um, you can look at the population of each grade level to see how programs are growing. So uh, for Courtney and Joel, you may want to be looking at the elementary numbers to see how, what's my potential student enrollment looking like in the future? How many feeder programs do you have in your school? A lot of times the formula tends to be between 2 to 3 middle schools feed one high school. Um, But again, depending on the size of the community, that could be different. And when you're doing that, that's also something where you're trying to consider things like, how am I going to allocate funds? And we just did this big project where we put together our budget, and we determined, what we needed for our programs, pie in the sky, and where to go from there. I was just talking to some friends the other day and said, okay, if I told you you had $4,500, or sorry, $450,000 to outfit 3 band programs, what are you doing? And the first thing they said was, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to buy myself 4 Renard Fox oboes. Okay. That's great. But, that's also $16,000 out of your budget for 4 instruments that will be played by 4 children over the course of 4 years. The same 4 kids. And when you think about how many kids are going to cycle through your program in 4 years, it could be upwards of 500, 600 kids when you think every year you're losing, you know, 20 to 30 or whatever, if you have a big class, and then you're gaining whatever. So is it worth that investment for those four kids? Now, um, and when we talk about that kind of budget, we're also talking about how is that money being spent from your county or state funding, you know, versus, if I want to get four Renard Fox oboes, right, knowing how much that they cost, about 4 grand a piece, um, that's not to say you shouldn't have one. That's to say you should be very considerate when purchasing one. Um, so
Do typical bands like have an like our band doesn't have one, but
no,
we're super small. So
no, they don't. They don't.
okay. All right. Just wanted to
Typically,
make sure. Because I was like,
typically,
is it the issue the oboe or is the issue like it's like a name brand? Like you could buy one cheaper and it could still suffice for what you're needing.
I mean, you can an oboe is going to cost you about $1,200.
Okay. Got
Okay,
it.
for a good high school level instrument, made of grenadilla wood, that's
Right.
about what
Right.
it'll cost. But then when you start looking at like a professional level instrument, what's
Right.
the guy in the orchestra playing? That's what he's playing.
Okay.
And instrumentalists will tell you it does make a difference. Um, but again, I played a gig years ago with this guy named Lou Soloff. Do any of you guys know who Lou Soloff is? Joel? He's a trumpet player. Do you know him? Good talk, Joel. We'll catch up later.
Okay.
Joel, do you know who Lou is?
I haven't heard the name.
Okay. He has since passed away, but so have you ever heard the song Spinning Wheel by Blood, Sweat, and Tears? If you
I,
haven't, you need to listen to it. But there's a trumpet solo in Spinning Wheel, um, where Lou hits, I mean, I believe it is a G3 above. It's ridiculous. And he played it with a 7C, which is a student mouthpiece. It's literally the kind of mouthpiece that comes in the horn when you rent it from the music store in sixth grade. And this iconic trumpet solo was played by this guy on a student horn with a student mouthpiece. He's like, well, that's what I had. When he recorded it, he's like, I was a kid. That's what I had. Um, so when people talk about, the quality of the instrument, yes, it definitely helps, but it can be done. A great player is going to sound great. Um, but again, so talking about strat planning, you want to be thinking about, what are my goals? Where's, with your band, with your choir, are we going to do, a big trip this year? Are we going to do a big trip every year? Are we going to do one every 4 years? Are we ever going to do one? And if we do one, what does that mean for my numbers? Right? Uh, you'll find a lot of directors will tell you that their program tends to get a little bit larger when they're about to do something cool, you know, do a Disney trip or go do a parade somewhere where it involves them staying somewhere overnight, any type of travel. Those are really cool experiences for kids. They're really cool experiences for the program. There's a lot of community that comes into that is bigger than just playing an instrument or singing, right? It's the dumb stuff like washing cars, selling candy bars, or cheesecakes, or meeting with the Great American Opportunities fools that sell candles and and all that other nonsense, right? There's always something. Um, but giving students the opportunity at that age to become invested in their own program is huge. And that's an extra musical thing. But when people talk about the things that they learned in school, they're not going to say, "Oh yeah, I remember we sold candy bars." They're going to go, "Man, I remember when we went to Disney World with the band or with the choir and how awesome it was." What they didn't realize was all the stuff that brought that group together and bonded them was the little itty bitty non-musical stuff. Um, so again, increasing diversity, students with disabilities, when we talk about things like fundraisers and parental involvement, um, there are communities, and it's not a wealthy or poor thing. There are communities where it's easier to get people involved than not. In some cases, there are very impoverished communities where you'll have every parent there if you want them. And you can shake your head, and I'll tell you some ways that I did it. Um, and there's also communities that are very, very wealthy that don't get parents in because it's a cultural thing. There are certain cultures where the parents just simply don't think to come to the school because it's not done where they're from or when they grew up. That wasn't what happened. And again, our experience in school is based on what we knew. As parents, we reflect on how we were as a student and what they did in our schools. And if I'm, an immigrant, I'm thinking about what happened in my school in another country in a lot of cases. And in a lot of those cases, it didn't involve my parents coming to the school. And what I was saying about impoverished communities and getting big enrollment at stuff, and Joel, this might be helpful to you. I don't know. Um, but when I was one of the things that I did to get parent volunteers in, our school had 3 washer and dryers in the building. And it was part of, I mean, I guess it was like from a home ec program back when it was a high school or whatever. At the time, it was a middle school. And when I sent out information for band booster stuff, I said, listen, I need the following tasks done, and this is before everybody had computers. I literally would write this down and send it home on paper to parents. But these are the things that I need done for the band program. If you can come in and give me 2 hours of your time, you can use our washer and dryer for free. All you need to do is provide the soap. And man, I'll tell you what, I had parents in that building every day. I had to tell them when not to come because I had so many people that wanted to come. And they did. They came in, you start your load of laundry, you got 45 minutes. What am I going to do? Well, you're going to file music for us, or you're going to get music in folders for us, or you're going to do this, and then wait, I got 60 minutes while I'm waiting on the dry cycle. Okay, what am I going to do? This, and this. And I had a list organized for them. And I'll tell you what, I had parents around from the time I got to work until well after I wanted to leave. I had parents there every day. And so when people would say, like, I don't know why, how you don't, um, you know, in the impoverished communities, we can't get parents there. Well, I would also do a thing where I said, okay, all of our band concerts, we're going to do a canned food drive. And I said, bring a canned food item if you can, right? And then I also said, we're not taking any of the cans. So it was put it there, and I left them there. And if the next day you wanted to come get one, come on and get one. Nobody's looking. That's what it's there for. It's there for all of us. And I mean, again, got all the parents there. They were there to see their kids, but they were also there, you know, in some cases, a parent may be taking the can and then bringing it home with them and then taking it back to the next. It didn't matter. But it showed an investment in the program. People are a lot more likely to promote success in your program if they're invested in it. So, how can funding be increased and stabilized for the future? Well, stabilization's hard, but increasing funding is basically if you can set a clear, reasonable goal. Have you guys ever heard of a SMART goal? uh, specific, maintainable, achievable, reasonable, and something else. Anyway, uh, schools got into this big, and business got really big into SMART goals. Um, and I've always believed, when people were preaching, oh, we got to have a SMART goal, I always believed that that taught people to aim low. It's like when I do a checklist, I do them on my phone. And sometimes if I'm feeling bummed about not getting stuff done, I will write stuff on the checklist that I've already done just so I can check it off. To me, that's what a SMART goal is, right? Yeah, we can do that. But instead, I do what I like to call a bag. Big, hairy, audacious goal. Shoot for the moon, you'll end up in the stars, right? So when we talk about increasing funding, I want to say, like, listen, I would like to, within the next 5 years, I would like to purchase a full set of coral risers, um, 4 tier with rails and a shell. Now, Courtney, because Joel and Sarah probably don't know, how much am I talking about? Ballpark. Give me a ballpark on that.
Well, just one riser is around 2 grand. So how many, how are you
I said
considering
I want
all?
6 of them.
Oh, that's, you're looking at 12,000. Probably
And a
15,
shell.
15 to $20,000.
Right. With a coral shell, the whole bit, right? And
Yeah.
so what do I do? Well, I say, here's where I want to end up. How do I now I said 6 and I said 4 tier, right? About how many kids fit on one set of risers? 12, right?
Yeah, roughly.
Right. Okay. There's no way I'm going to actually need 6 sets and in my school, but I'm going to ask for 6 sets. And I'll probably, if I'm really lucky and we're really motivated, we get 4. Guess what? That's a win,
Yeah.
right? Uh, do we get the shell? Man, that'd be awesome. Probably not. But again, if we can outline it and say, this is where we want to be, that's how we can increase that funding. And you plug it, man. You go to all of your local big businesses, like Sarah, when we were talking about with the Walmart grants and the Target grants. Hey, guess what? Um, 2 grand will buy blank. This is how much I've raised so far, but if you guys can kick in the 2 grand, then I could be at this next step. And while I'm doing that with them, I'm also going to Publix and going, hey, listen, Walmart's giving me 2 grand to do this. And if you guys jump in there too, we could have 2 sets of risers, on year one of our 5 year goal. That's pretty amazing. And that's only in Q1. You have 4 quarters and you're giving out the same amount of money every quarter. I'm just asking for it once from y'all. Um, that's how stuff gets done. Um, all right, so
So do you go ask, or do you have parents ask, or do you have kids ask?
I don't have kids ask.
Okay.
When I'm looking for grant stuff, I typically don't have kids ask, but what I will do is I'll say to kids, I'll say, hey, listen, if you're, and it depends on your community as well, but I'll say, like, listen, if your, mom or dad's business, offers some type of grant program, tell them we're interested. And a lot of times, if you say to the whole community, this is what we're looking to do, those parents are going to come out of the woodwork anyway and say, hey, you know what? My company has to do this, or we want to offer this scholarship or whatever, to send a kid to band camp or to send, um, so that kind of stuff does happen. And again, look here on the slide where it says results in a written framework for action. Cannot stress that enough. It's one thing for that to be in your head. But if it's in your head, nobody else knows what it is. I would have it big, visible. I would refer to it. If it's something, if my goal is to get those 6 sets of risers, every communication that I have with parents, I would put in at least a sentence or two about, hey, we're doing great on this, and then I would tongue in cheek it by the end of the year. Hey, you sick of hearing me talk about how we're doing this? Well, we can finish up by getting X amount of dollars. Yeah. All right. So in the Hansen book, it gives you steps to writing a strat plan. Okay. Okay. SWOT. Are you familiar with the term SWOT? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, right? There's the internal and the external. So when we're looking at a plan, we're looking for a SWOT analysis. What's good about this idea? What's bad about this idea? What'll help my program? What could hurt my program? Now, external, that's when we're asking other people for help, right? What are the opportunities that I can offer you? And what are the threats to my program by offering you something, right? What's harmful for that? And in some cases, there are threats, right? People feel like you owe them something. And you find out pretty quickly whether or not it's going to be somebody you're going to want to work with. When we're talking about internal strengths and weaknesses, especially if your program is separated, if you have a choir program and a band program, and it's not the music program, a lot of times there gets to be some, well, that's not fair. How come the band got this? And it is usually the band. I'll be honest. It usually is the choir folks going, how come the band got this and I didn't? Well, the opportunities that the band allows lends itself more readily to the community. Now, that's not saying that there aren't choirs out there that are out, getting their face out there, because again, performing arts, we are the face of our schools. And unfortunately and fortunately, what the community knows is only what they see us doing outside of the building, not in the classroom. You don't have people out there doing math problems in the street, you know, for a community. They just don't do it, and nobody expects them to, right? But if somebody tells you they're a comedian, the first thing you think is tell me a joke. Hopefully you don't say that, but when we talk about being musicians, well, let's hear you guys play. That's what people want to do. It doesn't matter how much time goes into that. Okay, legal and ethical issues. There's a lot of legal stuff that we deal with in music education. A big chunk of it being copyright, and we spoke about that last week. And what it costs to buy the rights to something versus what it costs to pay the penalties for not having the rights to something. And I'll tell you, as painful as it is to buy the rights, it is always the right thing to do to buy the rights. Um, but there's a lot of other things as well. Um, and I was talking to a friend at a music store the other day, and he gave me a scenario that just broke my heart. We were talking about, what we thought were the most important things for the music store guy who comes into the school. What's the most important thing for him to do? And I said, well, he needs to make sure that there's an instrument in the hand of every kid that needs an instrument, right? And they said, that's awesome. I said, because when, and I went on my soapbox, as we tend to do in music, right? And I was like, well, because before when I had a kid in my band program that, if their, key got stuck and they had to send it off to the shop, that's at least a week that kid's not playing in my instrument. And I feel that's robbery. We're paying tax dollars to have this kid in the band program, and here he is sitting there doing nothing, not because he wants to do nothing, but because we can't provide him for that, right? Good soapbox to be on, right? Makes you go, yeah, we need to make sure that kid has a loaner instrument. And they said that. And then they said, but what do we do if the kid's renting an instrument from our music store and is behind, 3 months in payments and we have to fix the horn? They have a contract, but they also have a debt. Do you take the horn from the child? Right. So I went, oh my God. And I said, man, I don't have an answer for you. Um, I said, more than likely what I would do is I would probably fix it myself, if I could. And maybe it wouldn't be as good as if I sent it to the shop, but it would work. as far as, children, or people owing money on instruments, I said, I would never ask the child for the horn. I would deal with the parent. No child needs that trauma. No child needs that memory of some faceless person taking away their instrument that that brings them joy. Um, okay, so legal issues to consider. I just saw that that word is misspelled. Sorry about that. We'll fix that later. Um, Discrimination, equity, and equality. Now, you guys know there is a huge difference between equity and equality, correct? This is where we all nod our heads. I can only see one, but we're all nodding. Joel, you're nodding, right? Sarah, you're virtually nodding as well. Good.
Yes.
Good. Um, and we probably have talked about this, like when COVID hit and people were talking about equity and equality, I said, well, every kid needs a computer. Let's do it. Let's make sure that we can put Chromebooks in the hands of all of these kids, or a tablet, or Kindle Fire, or something. And there was such a great drive in a lot of communities. Courtney shaking her head. Did that not happen where you are?
I was at a private school, so it was a completely different world for
Okay.
us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, when that happened, I was in a Title I school where the bulk of my students lived in trailer parks. And we really did, as a community, they did a great job of making sure that kids had a Chromebook, right? That's not equality, right? I have a computer now, you have a computer. Look, we're equal, right? But I also have internet. We didn't get we didn't focus on that. We're like, here's your computer. How come you're not doing your work? Oh, and then once we finally got around to, okay, well, we got these T-Mobile hotspots. T-Mobile did a great deal, a wonderfully multi-million dollar donation of hotspots to Title I schools all over the nation. And, so we said, all right, so here's that. But guess what? That took up man hours, which we were happy to spend. But I literally went from door to door in the trailer park with T-Mobile hotspots and set people up with internet in their Chromebook. Because if they brought the machine to my school and I set it up there, it wasn't going to work when they got to their house. I literally had, and that was because I could do it. But that's not equity, right? Because how many schools were doing that? Even in my own school district, most of the people that had my job at the time were like, oh, I just hand them to the kid and have them take them home with them. Well, how do you know it's working? Right? Or they check it out from the library. Okay, well, that's a great way to keep a record of it, but how do you know it's working? Um, so creating a harassment and bullying free environment. Bullying is a word that gets thrown around a lot and quickly. A lot of times, bullying, and I'm saying there's a difference between being a bully and being unreasonable. I think that a lot of times when people are unreasonable, we jump to calling it bullying. Now, that's not to say being unreasonable is okay, because it's not. Um, but to me, um, we want, and when I say unreasonable, that would be a harassment environment as well. So when we say harassment and bullying free environment, basically we're just trying to make sure that we, as the authoritative figures, are treating those, with respect, even sometimes when they don't treat us with respect and it's hard to be nice to them. Sometimes that's just what we have to do. Um, ever heard the saying, you catch more flies with honey? I am a firm believer. If there was two things I would say, you catch more flies with honey, and the cream will rise to the top. When I see something that I think is unfair, which happens a lot in education, somebody all of a sudden gets a promotion to a job, and you're like, they weren't good at their job before. Why did we move them up? Right? Um, and I truly believe that a great administrator had to be a great teacher. And not all great teachers will be great administrators, but all great administrators were great teachers. And when I see a teacher that I don't think is a great teacher get that job, I worry, but at the same time, I hope for the best with them. And I tell you, the cream rises to the top. If they're really not cut out for it, they won't last. Um, anyway, all right. So, legal rights of students and teachers, we went over this kind of stuff last week. Negligence, quite simply, do your job, right? We just talked about copyright, First Amendment rights, things like how we celebrate holidays, ceremonies, etc. And I think I gave you guys the example last week of a childhood hymn by David Holsinger. Jesus loves me, this I know, right? Beautiful song, beautiful song. And you know what? It's not a religious song, even though the words are what the words are. It's a spiritual, which is part of Americana and the culture of our nation. That is not a religious thing in any. Playing Handel's Messiah with your choir, one means you have a pretty darn good choir, because that's a hard piece of music, especially there's some very hard parts to that when it gets fugal and whatnot. But again, not a religious work, although it was written for the church, right? It is a classical work and it's a beautiful work. And again, it's a piece of music that's written, students will learn from doing that. And they're not going to be um, converted by singing Handel's Messiah. They'll be enriched, not religiously, musically, right? Um, Special ed law, we talked a little bit about that also when we said basically you just want to make sure that any type of IEP is only given to those who are, quote, privileged information to, right? A teacher of record. We do not share that information with anybody else. You don't, honestly, and this is a big one, we don't even talk about it. Um, Now, I'll tell you what I have come up with, and I got this from a coworker probably 25 years ago. They said, "Oh, that's an AR student." What's AR? Ain't right, right? So that was all I needed to hear, right? I didn't need to go, okay, well, what's the IEP, whatever, because that wasn't for me to know. But I'd say, what's going on with Johnny? Johnny's AR. Oh, gotcha. Move on, right? Now, am I going to tell other teachers in my building what AR means? No. If they need to know, they heard it from that other person, not me. Right? Um, anyway, what would you do? Okay, let's go over these real quick because I'm curious as to some of the responses that we get. Okay. So it's the last day of pre-planning, and the principal of your school has invited the faculty and staff to their families to a cookout at the school beginning at 2 p.m. The principal's husband is a local pastor and well liked by everyone. The pastor offers a prayer before the meal, and the prayer includes a call to join activities at his church for rest and renewal during the summer break. As you get your food, you realize that members of his church are serving and have provided homemade desserts. None of this is really alarming to you, but your colleague, who is Jewish, mentions that it makes her somewhat uncomfortable. What, if any, action should or would you take? Would you make a recommendation to your colleague for a possible action? So this is going to be where we talk. Okay, I'm going to stop the screen share real quick so I can see everybody better. Everybody got the scenario down though? Yep. Okay. Okay, good, good, good. So what do you do? Let's start with Courtney, and then Sarah, you can go ahead and be typing yours right now, okay? Joel, you're after Courtney. Okay.
Um, what would I do? I would probably ask the coworker to have a conversation with the principal. and just ask like, hey, I mean, I think I personally don't see it's a big deal that he prayed because I know in Jewish culture they pray, but it's overcrossed the line when it was like, oh, come to our church, the whole nine yards. That takes a whole new bound. I don't think it's a big deal that the people served food as long
No,
as it wasn't, hey, come to our church. I mean, like, I think there's a fine line there. Like, our church goes to our local school and does a teacher appreciation meal,
sure.
but it's not us inviting people to, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Well,
that
and
would
that's
be,
in your family too, right, Courtney?
yeah,
Yeah, right.
yeah. So it's made really clear that, like, there's a fine line that you can't cross.
Right.
Um, so I would just ask them to have that conversation with the principal and this. If you feel uncomfortable, they might not even think about it. So it made me feel uncomfortable because,
Mm-hmm.
and if it's like a legitimate reason, then if it was just they serve dessert, then that's a little over the top.
Right.
Like, yeah, you could get over it.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right, Joel, what's your take on this, my friend? And Sarah, you're next. Okay, so we're typing, right? All right, Joel, you got a take here?
All right, I was still trying to read. I screenshot it. And I was reading it. Give me a second.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I kind of agree with Courtney. If they feel uncomfortable about it, they should definitely let the principal know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
Okay, good. Sarah says, I think volunteering from the church members and asking to go to the church was too much. Feel
yeah.
like a person would be doing anything. Okay. The theme here seems to be recommend the coworker talk to the principal if it bothered him. I like that. And that shouldn't just be because of a religious thing or anything. In general, if there's something that's happening in your building that bothers you, you need to talk to somebody who can help you have that stop bothering you, right? Um, Now, I'll tell you, having been in this situation many times in my career as the one Jewish guy working in a building where we would have churches come in and do stuff like that, uh, I think many of you might be surprised by my take on it. And that is, I believe that being offended is a choice. We decide what we are willing to let something bother us, right? If you are bothered by the fact, now they're not saying you have to come to our church. They're saying, please come to our church, or we'd like to see you. Great. I know that you'd like to see us there. That'd be great for your church, wouldn't it, to have more people there? I'm sorry, but I won't be there. Or maybe I will. For me, it was always, oh, that's nice to know. But, you know, none of that was ever offensive to me. Um, And I was always grateful to have a community that was willing to help out like that. We had one of our biggest contributors was North Point Ministries, Reverend Andy Stanley. They even had me in their newspaper thing that they sent out because they donated 30 Chromebooks to my school. Um, and it was like, and what was funny was so many people in our community were members of that church. They were like, wow, David, they were doing that. I was like, I had no idea that they wrote an article about us. I had no idea that they had my picture in there. I'd have given them a better picture if they'd asked. But again, being offended is a choice. And there is a time where we may choose to be offended. And I'll give you an example of that. It was a school that I was in many, many years ago. And same type of thing where the church had brought in a meal and all this. And my principal, and to be honest and to be fair, I did not care for the person. That was me. I did not care for her. But something that she said was offensive to me. And she said at this breakfast, well, we brought bagels for our Jewish friend. Like, okay. Like, We didn't have to go there. Thank you for the food. This is wonderful. Thank you for the community, the camaraderie, all that. You don't need to call that out. You don't, not all Jews love bagels, although I do. But other people like bagels too, and eating a bagel is not going to make you Jewish, right? Um, all right, so there's that scenario. Let's look at another one here. This is an interesting one too. You're the band director of a large, successful band program in a rural Georgia community, kind of like where Joel's at, that has a long tradition of local pastors offering prayer before football games. You have been approached by two local youth pastors seeking to give band members an opportunity to attend Bible study after practice 1 or 2 nights a week. Would you allow this? What action should or would you take? And what will inform your opinion or decision?
I'd run it through FCA.
Oh,
And if it's under FCA, then you were like good as gold. Our band director is actually like a pastor in the county and stuff. So he does do that, but he makes it very clear to the students that this is not part of band. It's just an extra opportunity. If you're interested, come. If not, you don't have to.
Joel, what are your thoughts?
And I agree too. Just letting them know that it's voluntary and it's nothing mandatory. That's a part of the program, but that's something that's totally different.
Yeah.
Um,
Personally, what they do after practice
yeah, that time.
is on them. Now, in saying that, even if it was at my church, I probably would not go. If the students wanted to go, that would be great. But by me going to that event after school, that puts my stamp of endorsement on it. And that's where you get into a conflict of interest. Um, all right. So that is all of the stuff on our ethics and legal issues. Real quick, before we wrap everything up, let's go over our strat plan one more time here. We're looking at what our goals would be for short term. We're looking at what our goals would be for long term. Big things. And this is true. And we talked about this. I know that there's a lot of repetition in this. It's because it is that important. Um, when you're spending money, you want to know how many students are affected by that money. How many people are impacted by you spending that money? How long is the thing that you're spending the money on? What's the lasting impact of it? Is it going to be an instrument that lasts for 10 years? That's very different than spending the same amount of money on an instrument that lasts for 3 years, or even 3 instruments that last for 3 years. Interesting. Sarah, I like that take. Yeah. Um, I see your point, Sarah. Um, and I guess I would have to be in that situation to determine how I felt about it. But you're right, it does kind of give that vibe to it, but it also kind of says, "Hey, we're a family and a community, and I want you to see that, I'm a married person too, and this is what my spouse does, and we're supporting them." But yeah, and honestly, Sarah, you're absolutely right. I think everything is going to be a case by case. There's very few things that we just go, never. Except, what are the two big ones? The
Money and the kids.
money
Don't
and
touch.
honey. That's right. Never mess with the money or the honey. Okay. All right. So, any questions before we wrap for today? For the good of the group, let's get those first.
All right, the field experience
Yes.
reflection. I'm looking at the document
Mm-hmm.
and there's this long one. I don't know if you can see.
I'm
Well,
going to
that
pull it up right now.
okay. Let me pull up the page and I can tell you what page number.
Are you talking about from the guidelines and template doc?
It said maybe because it pulls up and it says Education Specialist Field Experience
Yep.
Guidelines.
Yep. Got it.
Like a
I'll
14
share it
page
with you.
document. So are you wanting page 4 or are you wanting down at the very bottom where it's like the music? Because it looks like it's going in the same thing.
Yeah, you're filling out the stuff that's on page 4.
Okay, and then
What?
do
So
we put
what?
it
Now what?
in the bottom at the very bottom
Mm-hmm.
where it says the course is MUED 8100?
Mm-hmm. Yes. MUED 8100.
Okay, so for you though, for the actual assignment, you just need the page 4. And then
Yes.
once we get your notes, we just copy it in.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, for references, if we're using, since we're doing the interviews, like in our other class, we're having to do an interview, but they said that it would be like firsthand personal communication that we would not do a reference sheet for
You
that.
don't need to do a reference for that.
Okay, so we won't have any references unless we
Um,
reference something
if
in
you reference something in Hanson, you can
Hanson.
put that in
Okay,
there. Yeah.
okay, all right.
Yep. Um, it's funny. I don't love the wording of this what, so what, now what, but my buddy actually created this form, Nick Crowder. Uh, really here, 5/18/20. Um, so, and that sounds exactly like him. So, but anyway, yeah, basically where it says 5 sentences, as much as you need,
Okay.
say what you need to say, or as little as you need to say what you need to say. I'm not going to limit you on either end, okay?
Okay. I think that was, oh, the other thing that Sarah had asked, do we make them anonymous? Like in our other class, like interviewee number 1 or, Beethoven said, blah, 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 whatever.
Um, if this were something that we were going to be publishing, then yes, it would be anonymous. It doesn't matter to me either way.
Okay.
Technically, it should, like I would say as a general practice, I would just say my administrator.
Okay.
That's who you interviewed, or the music teacher, or,
Okay.
yeah. Let me stop that share. Ah. Um, Honestly, Sarah, if you do a 2-page interview, I'll take that the same way as I take this assignment. That's either one's fine. No, you don't want to write a 2-page paper for me? Fine. All right. Not another one. Yeah. It's crazy. So the other class that I'm teaching this semester is a law class, and these folks are writing a paper Are you taking law? No.
No, not yet.
Not yet. But they're writing a paper a week and defending a scenario a week. So it's a lot of writing. It's really interesting, but yeah.